For 5 birthdays in a row, my family has forgotten to call me. So this year, I prepared a special surprise. And when the evening news came on, they all recognized me on TV. The morning of my 59th birthday dawned like any other day. No special anticipation, no checking my phone every few minutes. I'd learned my lesson over the past 5 years. The first time my children forgot, I'd spent the entire day jumping at every notification, certain that each buzz would be Michael, Sophia, or Thomas, remembering their mother's birthday. By the 3rd forgotten birthday, I'd stopped expecting anything. By last year, I'd stopped hoping. Happy birthday to me, I murmured to the empty kitchen as I measured coffee grounds with the precision that 30 years of professional cooking had ingrained in me. My kitchen had always been my sanctuary, the heart of our family home where I'd raised 3 children, catered countless celebrations, and quietly buried my dreams beneath casserole dishes and cookie sheets. After Robert died 6 years ago, it became my silent companion, the place where I still felt most like myself. If you're watching, subscribe and tell me in the comments what time you're listening. I was halfway through my coffee when the phone rang. For a heartbeat, my spirits lifted. Perhaps this year would be different, until I saw Caitlin's name on the screen. Eleanor Bennett, birthday girl. Caitlin's voice bubbled through the speaker. Are you having second thoughts? Please tell me you're not having second thoughts. I'm not, I assured her, though my stomach fluttered with butterflies. Just nervous. What was I thinking? Agreeing to go on television at my age. You were thinking it's about time the world got a taste of what your family has been taking for granted for decades, Caitlin said firmly. Trust me, you're going to be amazing. The cameras are going to love you. Caitlin had been saying that for years. As a producer for Good Morning City, our local morning show, she'd been trying to convince me to do a cooking segment since she first tasted my bourbon-glazed apple tart at a community fundraiser. I'd always declined, content to stay behind the scenes of my small catering business, feeding other people's celebrations while remaining invisible myself. But something had shifted in me after last year's forgotten birthday. Something that whispered it was time to step into the light, not for my children's attention, but for myself, for that quiet 19-year-old who'd once dreamed of performing before trading spotlights for stovetops when an unexpected pregnancy rearranged her life. Remember, you're scheduled for 5 minutes at 9:15. Caitlin continued. The car will pick you up at 8 Quay. Just bring yourself. We've got all the ingredients ready based on your list. The 15-minute caramelized apple pie, I confirmed, mentally reviewing the recipe I'd prepared hundreds of times. Simple but impressive. Perfect for television, Caitlin agreed, and perfect for viewers who think good food has to be complicated. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and checked my email and social media. Still no birthday messages. Michael was probably buried in presentations for his tech company. Sophia would be prepping for the dinner service at her restaurant. Thomas, in his financial office halfway around the world, was likely already asleep, my birthday having come and gone in his time zone without notice. I closed the laptop and headed to my bedroom to prepare for my television debut. What does one wear for a cooking segment that happens to fall on your 59th birthday that no one remembered? I settled on a cobalt blue blouse that Robert always said brought out my eyes, black pants, and comfortable but stylish shoes. I applied makeup with more care than usual, studying my reflection in the mirror. The face that looked back was lined with years of laughter, worry, and concentration over steaming pots. My once auburn hair now had striking silver streaks that I'd finally stopped dyeing last year. Not old, Robert used to say, just seasoned like a good cast iron skillet. The car arrived precisely at 8, and my stomach clenched with a mixture of anticipation and terror. What was I doing? I'd spent my life in kitchens, not in front of cameras. My children would probably never even see this. They certainly weren't the type to watch morning television. But as we drove toward the studio, I realized this wasn't about them. For once, this was about me, Eleanor Bennett, not just Michael, Sophia, and Thomas's mother, not just Robert's widow, not just the woman who made sure everyone else was fed and celebrated. The studio was a whirlwind of activity. People with headsets rushing about, makeup artists touching up the hosts, production assistants checking clipboards. Caitlin met me at the entrance, her familiar face a welcome sight amid the chaos. "You look fantastic," she exclaimed, guiding me through the maze of cables and cameras. "We've got your station all set up. The apples are prepped, butter's at room temperature, everything's measured out." A young man with a headset whisked me to a makeup chair, where an artist added more powder and defined my eyes. "The lights are brutal," she explained. "This will keep you from looking washed out." Before I knew it, I was standing behind a counter on set, a gleaming array of ingredients before me, trying not to stare at the cameras or the red lights indicating they were recording. Devin Pierce, the handsome host I'd seen on television for years, approached with a practiced smile. "Our guest chef today is a local catering legend, I'm told," he said, his voice considerably warmer off-camera than I'd expected. "Legend might be stretching it," I replied with a nervous laugh. "Just a home cook who turned professional." "Well, Caitlin swears you make magic happen in the kitchen. Are you ready?" Was I ready? After 59 years of feeding others, of nurturing everyone but myself, of setting aside my own dreams to raise 3 successful children who couldn't remember to call on my birthday, was I ready to finally step into the spotlight, even if just for 5 minutes on local television? "I've been ready for decades," I said with sudden clarity. "Just didn't know it until now." Devin's eyebrows rose slightly, his professional interest piqued by something in my tone. "We're on in 30 seconds. Called a producer. Devin took his mark beside me. "Just be yourself," he advised quickly. "Forget the cameras. Talk to me like we're in your kitchen." The floor director counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. "Welcome back to Good Morning City." Devin smiled into the camera. "Today we're joined by Eleanor Bennett, who's going to show us how to make a caramelized apple pie in just 15 minutes. Eleanor, I understand this is your first time on television?" The camera turned to me, and in that moment, everything changed. "First time on television, and coincidentally, it's my birthday today," I heard myself say, the words flowing with surprising ease. So I thought, why not give myself something new at 59? The moment the camera turned to me, something shifted inside. The nervous energy that had knotted my stomach transformed into a strange, electric confidence. This kitchen set, with its gleaming countertops and perfectly arranged ingredients, was just another kitchen. And kitchens were where I'd always felt most powerful. "Well, happy birthday," Devin exclaimed, genuine warmth in his voice. "What a fun way to celebrate. I understand your children are all successful professionals now?" "They are," I replied, deftly moving to the ingredients without missing a beat. "All very busy with important lives. Now, shall we make some magic happen with these apples? The trick to this recipe is working quickly with high heat." As I spoke, my hands moved with the practiced precision of someone who had prepared thousands of meals. I melted butter in the waiting skillet, explaining how the sliced apples needed to hit a specific temperature to caramelize properly, rather than simply steam. "Most people are afraid of high heat," I said, adding the apple slices to the sizzling pan. "But you have to trust yourself in the kitchen. Sometimes you need to turn up the heat to transform something ordinary into something extraordinary." Devin laughed. "Sounds like a life philosophy as much as a cooking tip." "Cooking is life," I responded, tossing cinnamon and a pinch of salt into the pan with a flourish that came naturally. Both require timing, instinct, and knowing when to follow the recipe versus when to improvise. I'd expected to be nervous, to fumble my words or my movements, but instead, I felt a strange sense of homecoming. The camera wasn't intimidating. It was simply another person to share my food with, another audience to nourish. As I worked, stories began spilling out. Tales of cooking for 3 picky children, of catering society weddings where the bride changed the menu 4 times, of the time I'd salvaged a fallen soufflé for the mayor's anniversary dinner. This quick caramel technique saved me countless times when my children demanded dessert with no warning, I explained, swirling the now golden apples in their butterscotch-colored sauce. When Sophia, she's a chef herself now, was about 8, she announced to dinner guests that I would be serving apple pie, which was news to me. The studio crew laughed, and I caught sight of Caitlin beaming from behind the cameras. The 5-minute segment was stretching well beyond its allotted time, but no one seemed to be cutting me off. "Speaking of your chef daughter," Devin said, "did she inherit your kitchen instincts?" "Sophia has incredible talent," I acknowledged, rolling out the pre-made pastry dough with efficient movements. Though she might be surprised to learn how many of her signature techniques she actually absorbed watching me cook all those years. I winked at the camera, surprising myself with the spontaneous gesture. "And your other children?" Devin prompted, clearly enjoying our rapport. "Michael's in tech marketing. He appreciates good food but can barely make toast. And Thomas works in finance overseas. They're all wonderful, accomplished people who— I paused for a fraction of a second, then decided to go for honesty, who are probably too busy to watch their mother make apple pie on morning television. There was something liberating about saying it out loud, not with bitterness, but with a matter-of-fact acceptance that made me stand taller. I folded the pastry over the caramelized apples with a deft motion, creating a rustic galette. This is the beauty of this recipe, I continued smoothly. It looks impressive, but forgives imperfection. The more rustic it appears, the more authentic it feels. I spent too many years trying to make everything perfect. Perfect meals, perfect mother, perfect family. Eventually, you learn that the flaws and folds are where the character lives. Devin was watching me with undisguised fascination, our planned cooking demonstration having evolved into something far more compelling. Into the oven for 12 minutes, I narrated, sliding the pan into the waiting oven. And because television magic allows us to fast forward through the boring parts, I gestured with a flourish. On cue, a production assistant handed me an identical dish, perfectly baked and golden. "Would you look at that?" I exclaimed with theatrical timing that felt surprisingly natural. Exactly 12 minutes later, Devin's laugh was genuine as he leaned in to smell the finished pie. "That looks incredible, Eleanor." I cut him a slice, watching with satisfaction as the caramelized filling oozed onto the plate. Years of experience told me the balance of sweet and tart would be perfect, the crust buttery and crisp. Devin took a bite and closed his eyes momentarily. "Oh my God," he murmured, forgetting television formality. That's not just good, that's transcendent. "Food should be an experience, not just sustenance," I said, cutting a second slice. "Life's too short for mediocre pie." The floor director was making circular motions with his finger, "Wrap it up," but Devin seemed reluctant to end the segment. "Eleanor Bennett, you are an absolute delight," he said, turning to the camera. "I think we can all agree we need more of Eleanor's wisdom and fantastic recipes on this show. What do you say, folks? Should we make this a regular feature?" The crew behind the cameras broke into spontaneous applause, and I felt a blush rising to my cheeks. This hadn't been part of the plan. My birthday gift to myself was supposed to be one brief appearance, a small adventure, not whatever this was becoming. "Well, that's a conversation for another day," I said, falling back on the practical demeanor that had carried me through life's uncertainties. "For now, I've got a birthday to celebrate, even if it's just me and this apple pie." As the segment finally ended and the cameras turned away, Devin leaned close. "I wasn't just playing for the cameras, Eleanor. You're a natural. The audience is going to love you." Caitlin rushed over, her face flushed with excitement. "Eleanor, that was incredible. You completely stole the show." Did I go too long? I lost track of time completely. "Too long? Are you kidding?" Caitlin laughed. "The producer wants to talk to you, right now, about a regular segment." As if summoned by her words, a tall man in a crisp suit approached, hand extended. "Ms. Bennett, I'm David Russell, executive producer. We need to talk about your future on this show." My mind spun. This was supposed to be a small birthday adventure, a tiny act of self-celebration on a day when my children would, once again, forget to call. Instead, as the studio buzzed around me, I realized I might have accidentally stumbled into the spotlight I'd abandoned decades ago. And somewhere across the city and around the world, my children were going about their busy days, completely unaware that their ordinary mother had just become the most compelling thing on morning television. "A regular segment?" I repeated, wiping my hands on a kitchen towel as David Russell guided me to a quieter corner of the studio. "Your 5 minutes just became the most engaging content we've had in months," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat in a director's chair emblazoned with the show's logo. "The spontaneity, the authenticity, you can't manufacture that kind of connection." Caitlin hovered nearby, poorly concealing her excitement as David continued. "We've been looking to expand our lifestyle content, specifically food segments that feel accessible yet aspirational. Your approach, simple techniques with impressive results, is exactly what our viewers respond to." My mind was still processing the surreal shift in my quiet birthday plans. This was just supposed to be a one-time thing, a little adventure. "The best opportunities often come unexpectedly," David replied, with the confidence of someone used to making quick decisions. "I'm proposing a weekly segment, Cooking with Eleanor, real food for real life, 10 minutes every Thursday. We'd pay you as a regular contributor, of course. The practical side of me, the woman who had budgeted carefully as a single mother, who had built a modest catering business through disciplined financial management, immediately calculated what this might mean for my retirement savings. My current catering work had slowed considerably. I was semi-retired already, taking only the occasional job that interested me. I'd need to think about it, I said, surprising myself with my restraint. The younger Eleanor, the one who had once dreamed of spotlights before life intervened, was practically screaming at me to accept immediately. David nodded, respecting my caution. Of course, but I should mention that we're already getting feedback. He held up his phone, displaying the station's social media account. The segment is streaming online, and the comments are pouring in. Curiously, I took the phone and scrolled through dozens of comments. Who is this Eleanor woman? She's amazing, like watching my own mom but funnier. Can we get her a permanent spot? That apple pie technique just saved my weekend plans. Finally, someone who makes cooking look accessible instead of intimidating. And most surprisingly, Eleanor Bennett is giving major main character energy at 59. We all need this energy. Main character energy? I echoed, unfamiliar with the phrase. Caitlin laughed. It means you're living like the protagonist of your own story, not a supporting character in someone else's. It's a compliment, a big one from younger viewers. We'd like to film a proper introduction segment this afternoon, David continued. Nothing complicated, just you talking about your background, your philosophy on food. Then we can discuss the regular spot details. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably birthday wishes from my catering assistant Maria, or perhaps my neighbor George, who never forgot. I ignored it, focusing on the unexpected crossroads before me. You don't need to decide on the regular segment today, David added, recognizing my hesitation. But the introduction piece would be valuable regardless, especially with the online traction we're seeing. What would I need to do? I asked. Just be yourself, Caitlin interjected. That's what connected with viewers. Your stories, your perspective. I can do that, I heard myself agree. After all, it was my birthday. Why not extend the adventure a little longer? The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. A production assistant brought me to a dressing room where my makeup was refreshed. Another helped me select from several solid-colored blouses they kept on hand for guests. I chose a deep emerald green that complemented my silver-streaked auburn hair. They filmed me in what was designed to look like a home kitchen, though it was actually a set. I spoke about growing up helping my grandmother cook Sunday dinners, about feeding my children creative meals on a tight budget, about building a catering business from my home kitchen while raising 3 kids alone after Robert's unexpected death. The words flowed easily, as if I'd been waiting years to tell these stories to someone who actually wanted to hear them. Food is love made visible, I said at one point, surprising myself with the sentiment I'd never articulated before. It's how I've always communicated caring. Every birthday cake, every holiday meal, they were my love letters to my family. The irony wasn't lost on me. On this birthday, with no calls or texts from my children, I was discussing how food had been my language of love for them. But strangely, the pain of being forgotten felt more distant now, overshadowed by this unexpected opportunity to step into a new chapter. When the filming concluded, David approached with a formal offer letter for the weekly segment. The compensation was more than generous, significantly better than what my occasional catering jobs brought in. Think about it over the weekend, he suggested, but we'd like to start next Thursday if you're on board. I thanked him and gathered my belongings, my head spinning with possibilities I hadn't considered when I woke up that morning. Caitlin walked me to the waiting car that would take me home. What are you doing to celebrate tonight? She asked. Your birthday deserves something special after such an exciting day. I hadn't really planned anything, I admitted. Maybe I'll treat myself to dinner somewhere nice. You could come to dinner at our place, she offered. Jack's grilling steaks and the kids would love to see you. I appreciated her kindness, but shook my head. Thank you, but I think I need a quiet evening to process everything. The truth was, I wanted space to absorb what had happened without worrying about being social. As the car pulled away from the studio, I finally checked my phone. There were several messages, from Maria and George as expected, from a few old catering clients who'd seen me on television and were delighted to recognize their former chef, but nothing from Michael, Sophia, or Thomas. It was already afternoon. The pattern of forgotten birthdays was holding firm for the 5th year. Rather than the familiar sting of disappointment, I felt a strange new emotion, something like liberation. For years, I'd measured my birthday's success by their acknowledgement. Today, for the first time, my birthday had been meaningful regardless of their recognition. The car dropped me at my modest home, and I paused on the front walk, looking at the house where I'd raised my family. It suddenly seemed like a museum of my past life, filled with artifacts of the woman I had been, the mother who had centered her entire existence around her children. Inside, I slipped off my shoes and checked the time. The evening news would be starting in 20 minutes. I made myself a cup of tea and settled onto the couch, curious whether the morning show appearance would translate to any mention on the station's evening broadcast. I had no way of knowing that across the city, my son Michael was about to turn on the same news program while nursing a cold at home. That my daughter Sophia would be checking the broadcast on her phone during her pre-service staff meal. That halfway around the world, my son Thomas would receive a text from a hometown friend saying, "Dude, your mom is trending locally. Check this out." None of them had remembered my birthday yet, but they were about to remember that I existed. And now for something a bit different in our community spotlight, the evening news anchor announced with a warm smile. A local woman became an unexpected sensation on Good Morning City today, when what was supposed to be a simple cooking demonstration turned into what social media is calling the most wholesome content of the year. I nearly dropped my teacup as my own face appeared on screen. Not just a brief clip, but a carefully edited 2-minute segment showcasing the highlights of my morning appearance. Eleanor Bennett, a 59-year-old former caterer, charmed viewers with her straightforward cooking advice and philosophical take on life. The anchor continued. The segment, which was originally scheduled for just 5 minutes, was extended when producers recognized they had something special on their hands. The screen cut to me tossing apples in sizzling butter, saying, "Sometimes you need to turn up the heat to transform something ordinary into something extraordinary." I watched myself with a strange sense of detachment, as if observing a character in a film rather than my own performance. Who was this confident woman with the easy smile and quick wit? Had she been hiding inside me all these years? Bennett, who mentioned it was her birthday during the broadcast, has already been offered a regular spot on the morning show. The station's social media accounts have seen unprecedented engagement, with viewers calling for more of Eleanor's kitchen wisdom. The anchor's co-host chimed in. "I watched that segment this morning, Janet, and I've got to say, I already made that apple pie for my family tonight. It was as good as it looked." Sources tell us that Cooking with Eleanor will become a regular Thursday feature. The first anchor concluded. "Happy birthday, Eleanor, and congratulations on your new television career." I sat in stunned silence as the broadcast moved on to weather. Television career? The phrase seemed absurd. A fantasy from another lifetime, not something that could happen to a 59-year-old grandmother who had spent decades in the background. My phone, which had been quiet all day from my children, suddenly erupted with notifications, text messages, social media alerts, emails, all responding to my unexpected television debut. I scrolled through them in disbelief. "Eleanor, just saw you on the news. You were amazing. Why didn't you tell us you were going to be on TV?" Maria, "The whole neighborhood is talking about your segment. When's the next one?" George, "Mrs. Bennett, remember catering my daughter's wedding? We recognized you immediately. So wonderful to see you shining." Former client. And then, finally, a text from Michael. "Mom, was that you I just saw on the evening news? Call me." My finger hovered over his name. 5 years of forgotten birthdays flashed through my mind. Now suddenly, I warranted a phone call. Not because it was my birthday, but because I'd appeared on television. Before I could decide whether to call him back, another text appeared. This one from Sophia. "OMG, Mom? Everyone at the restaurant is freaking out. You're on the TV in our bar. What is happening?" And moments later, Thomas, despite the significant time difference, "Mother, Jensen just sent me a clip of you on television. Have you gone viral while I wasn't looking? Also, is it your birthday? I think I missed it again. Sorry." At least Thomas acknowledged missing my birthday, I thought wryly. The others hadn't even mentioned it, despite my having explicitly stated it during the broadcast. My momentary fame had eclipsed the original oversight in their minds. I set the phone down without responding to any of them, needing time to process my feelings. For years, I'd craved their attention, their acknowledgement. Now that I had it, through such an unexpected avenue, I found myself strangely ambivalent. The doorbell rang, interrupting my contemplation. When I opened it, I found a delivery person holding an elaborate flower arrangement. "Eleanor Bennett?" she confirmed, handing me the bouquet. "These just came in with a rush order." I carried the flowers to my kitchen counter, fishing out the small card nestled among the roses and lilies. "To our newest star, looking forward to Thursdays with Eleanor, the Good Morning City team." The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. When was the last time anyone had sent me flowers? Robert used to bring them for no reason at all, but since his death, this simple expression of appreciation had disappeared from my life. My phone rang. Michael again. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Mom!" His voice held a note of excitement I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "I can't believe it. You were amazing. Why didn't you tell any of us you were going to be on television?" "Hello, Michael," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Thank you. It was something I decided to do for myself. But this is huge. The clip is all over local social media. My co-worker's wife saw it and recognized our last name. Asked if you were related to me. I had no idea you could be so what?" I prompted when he faltered. "So charismatic," he finished. "You've always been Mom, you know? Making dinner, running your catering business. I never imagined you on television, captivating an audience." The unintentional slight stung. I'd always been Mom, as if that identity was inherently devoid of other dimensions, other talents, other dreams. "There's quite a lot about me you've never imagined, I suspect," I said, more coolly than I intended. A brief silence followed before Michael spoke again, his voice more subdued. "Hey, happy birthday, by the way. I was going to call. Got caught up in this big presentation and—" "It's fine, Michael," I interrupted, not wanting to hear another variation of the same excuse I'd received for years. "Thank you for the belated wishes. We should celebrate this weekend, both your birthday and your television debut. I could come over on Sunday with Rebecca and the kids. Sophia and Diego could bring the twins. We could make it a family thing." The sudden enthusiasm felt hollow, too little, too late, and prompted by my unexpected public visibility rather than genuine desire to celebrate me. "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I've actually made other plans. The studio wants to film some additional content this weekend." The lie came easily, surprising me. "Perhaps another time." "Oh," his disappointment sounded genuine. "Sure, of course. You're busy now. That's great, Mom. Really great." After we hung up, I fielded similar calls from Sophia and Thomas, each expressing amazement at my television appearance, each belatedly acknowledging my birthday, each suggesting sudden family gatherings that had never been priorities before. I declined them all with the same fabricated excuse about additional filming. The truth was, I needed space. Space to understand what had happened today, space to decide what I wanted from this unexpected opportunity, and space to process how it was already reshaping my relationships. As midnight approached, marking the end of my 59th birthday, I sat at my kitchen table with a slice of my own caramelized apple pie. The studio had sent home the one I'd made during the segment, and opened the formal offer letter from Good Morning City, a weekly cooking segment, my own platform, a second act I'd never dared to imagine. I signed my name with a flourish, taking the first step into a future suddenly rich with possibility. A future where I wasn't just Michael, Sophia, and Thomas's forgotten mother, but Eleanor Bennett, a woman with her own spotlight, her own voice, and her own story still unfolding. The week between signing the contract and my first official segment on Good Morning City passed in a whirlwind. Production meetings, wardrobe consultations, test kitchen sessions. I barely had time to process how dramatically my life had changed since my birthday. My children continued their campaign of renewed attention, texting daily with encouragement about my exciting opportunity and suggestions for recipes I might demonstrate on air. Their sudden engagement felt both gratifying and vaguely irritating. Where was this interest in my life before I became a local media curiosity? I maintained a polite but measured distance, responding to their messages with brief appreciation but avoiding commitments to family gatherings. "Still getting my bearings with this new venture," I explained. "Once I find my rhythm, we'll plan something." The truth was more complicated. Part of me wanted to embrace their rekindled attention, Another part resented that it took a television appearance to make them see me as someone worth noticing. I needed time to sort through these conflicting emotions before diving back into family dynamics. Thursday morning arrived with a flutter of nerves entirely different from my birthday appearance. Then, I had been a novelty act with nothing to lose. Now, expectations had been set. The station had invested in me, promoted my segment, even created custom graphics and a jingle for Cooking with Eleanor. "You're overthinking this," Caitlin assured me as I sat in the makeup chair, anxiety evident in my rigid posture. "Just be the same Eleanor who charmed everyone last week." "That Eleanor didn't know people would be watching," I replied, eyeing my reflection as the makeup artist added a touch more blush to my cheeks. "This Eleanor knows exactly how many viewers tune into the morning broadcast. Forget the numbers," Caitlin advised. "Think of it as cooking for one person, that viewer at home who needs your help making something special out of ordinary ingredients." Her framing helped. I'd spent decades cooking for others, translating complex techniques into accessible steps. This was just another form of that same service. Today's recipe was weeknight risotto without the stirring, my streamlined version of a dish most home cooks found intimidating. I'd selected it deliberately, impressive enough to justify my expertise, but practical enough to demonstrate my commitment to realistic home cooking. When the cameras began rolling, I surprised myself by slipping easily into the warm, confident persona that had emerged during my first appearance. The nervous energy transformed once again into engaging enthusiasm. "The secret to this no-stir method," I explained while sautéing aromatics, "is starting with very hot stock and the right rice. Most recipes call for constant attention, but real life rarely allows for 20 minutes of uninterrupted stirring, does it?" Devon, now established as my on-air partner, laughed in agreement. "Not in my house, that's for sure." "Exactly. We're all juggling too many responsibilities to stand sentinel over a pot of rice." This technique lets you build those same creamy layers of flavor while helping kids with homework or answering emails. I added the arborio rice to the pan with a dramatic sizzle. The trick is understanding why traditional risotto works, then finding clever ways to achieve the same result with less labor. As I cooked, I shared anecdotes about developing this recipe during the years when I was running a catering business while raising 3 teenagers alone. My daughter Sophia, who's now a chef herself, used to call this Mom's cheating risotto. Now I hear she serves a very similar version at her restaurant. Apparently it's not cheating when you charge $40 a plate for it. The crew laughed, and I caught sight of the floor director giving an enthusiastic thumbs up from behind the camera. The 10-minute segment flowed effortlessly, culminating in Devon's exaggerated eye roll of pleasure as he tasted the finished dish. "Eleanor Bennett, you are a culinary magician," he proclaimed, turning Thursday mornings into the highlight of our broadcast week. After the cameras stopped rolling, David approached with an unmistakable look of satisfaction. "That was perfect. We've already had viewers calling in asking if you offer cooking classes." "I never have," I admitted. "Always thought I lacked the proper credentials." "You have something better than credentials," he replied. "Natural teaching ability and authentic expertise. Would you consider it? The station could help organize it. Another revenue stream for both of us." The suggestion caught me off guard. Teaching cooking classes had been a long-time daydream, but I'd always talked myself out of it. Too busy with catering, too old to start something new, too lacking in formal culinary training. "I'll think about it," I promised, still processing how rapidly doors were opening that I'd assumed were permanently closed to me. In the dressing room afterward, I checked my phone to find congratulatory texts from all 3 children. Michael had watched live. Sophia had streamed it at the gym. Thomas had set an alarm despite the time difference to catch the online broadcast. Most surprising was a message from Sophia. "The risotto looks amazing. Better than mine, if I'm being honest. Could you share the exact recipe? We might want to revise ours." The request marked the first time in her professional career that Sophia had asked for my culinary input. Despite her obvious talent and training, she had always maintained a careful separation between her professional cooking and my home cooking, a distinction that had sometimes hurt more than she knew. I texted back, "I'll email you the precise measurements and timing. The secret is warming the stock to just below boiling before each addition." Her reply came immediately. "Thanks, Mom. Also, is it okay if I stop by this weekend? Just me? Not Diego and the twins. I'd like to catch up. Just us. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to maintain the protective distance I'd established, to continue this journey of self-discovery without immediately slipping back into family obligations. But another part recognized an overture that felt different from the others, more personal, less reactive to my sudden visibility. Sunday afternoon would work, I responded. I'll make that chocolate cake you always liked for your birthday. You don't have to cook for me, she protested. It's supposed to be about visiting you. I smiled at her phone. Cooking for people I love is never an obligation, Sophia. It's my love language, remember? Besides, I want to see if you still close your eyes on the first bite of that ganache like you did when you were 12. The exchange left me feeling unexpectedly lighter as I gathered my belongings. When I exited the station, I was startled to find a small group of women waiting near the door, ranging in age from 30s to 70s. It's her, one exclaimed when I appeared. Ms. Bennett. They approached eagerly, introducing themselves as local viewers who had been inspired by both my segments. One had made my caramelized apple pie for her church group. Another had already prepared the risotto recipe after watching the preview clips the station had released yesterday. My daughter and I have started cooking together because of you, said a woman about my age, gesturing to her adult daughter beside her. We're reconnecting in the kitchen after years of just text messages and obligatory holiday dinners. I listened to their stories with growing amazement. Somehow, my simple cooking demonstrations had touched these women's lives, creating ripples of connection and inspiration I never could have anticipated. Would you mind if we took a photo with you? They asked. Of course not, I agreed, still processing this surreal new reality where strangers recognized me from television. As I posed with this impromptu fan club, I caught sight of Caitlin watching from the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. She'd seen something in me that I hadn't recognized in myself, not just cooking skill, but the ability to connect through food in a way that resonated beyond my own kitchen. For the first time since this unexpected journey began, I allowed myself to fully embrace the possibility that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of attention, but perhaps the beginning of an entirely new chapter, one where Eleanor Bennett wasn't defined by being someone's mother, but by being gloriously, unabashedly herself. Sunday afternoon arrived with clear autumn light streaming through my kitchen windows as I put the finishing touches on Sophia's chocolate cake. The ganache was glossy perfection, reflecting the sunlight as I spread it in smooth, even strokes across the layers. Some habits never change. Even for a television personality, I still found peace in the precise motions of baking. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. Sophia had always been punctual, even as a teenager, a trait she'd inherited from her father, not from me and my more fluid relationship with time. When I opened the door, I was struck by how tired she looked. Her chef's life, the long hours, the relentless pressure, the perfectionism required to maintain her restaurant's reputation, was etched in the shadows beneath her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. "Hi, Mom," she said, stepping forward for an awkward hug. We hadn't embraced in months, maybe longer. Physical affection had gradually disappeared from our adult relationship, replaced by polite distance and increasingly perfunctory interactions. "Come in," I replied, leading her to the kitchen where the scent of chocolate hung rich in the air. "You look like you could use a cup of tea." "Is that my cake?" Sophia asked, her eyes widening at the gleaming chocolate creation on the counter. "Triple chocolate with espresso ganache," I confirmed, filling the kettle. "Still your favorite?" "I haven't had it in years," she admitted, settling onto a kitchen stool. "We serve a deconstructed chocolate terrine at the restaurant that the critics love. But it's not this." I set a perfect slice before her, then busied myself with tea preparations, giving her space to experience it without my hovering attention. From the corner of my eye, I saw her take the first bite. And yes, her eyes still closed involuntarily, just as they had when she was 12. "Oh my God," she murmured. "It's exactly how I remember it." "Some recipes don't need innovation," I said, placing a steaming mug of Earl Grey beside her plate. "They're already perfect." We sat in companionable silence for a few moments as she savored the cake. I waited, sensing she had come with something specific to discuss beyond my sudden television notoriety. "I owe you an apology," Sophia finally said, setting down her fork. "Several, actually." I raised an eyebrow but remained silent, giving her space to continue. I saw your first segment, the one on your birthday, and you mentioned how none of your children had called. I didn't even register it was your birthday until you said it on television." She looked down at her hands. "And then I realized I've missed your last 5 birthdays. Not just missed calling on the day, but completely forgotten until days or weeks later." "Yes," I acknowledged simply. No accusations, no emotional leverage, just confirmation of a painful truth. "I've been trying to understand why," she continued, meeting my eyes with the direct gaze that had always set her apart, even as a child. "At first, I made excuses. I'm busy. The restaurant consumes everything. Everyone forgets things sometimes. But 5 years in a row isn't forgetfulness. It's a pattern." I sipped my tea, waiting as she worked through her thoughts. "The thing is, Mom, you never forgot a single one of my birthdays. Even when I was at culinary school in France, you mailed packages timed to arrive exactly on my birthday. You remembered Michael's and Thomas's birthdays, all our half-birthdays as kids, every anniversary and milestone." She paused, swallowing hard. "And somewhere along the way, we stopped doing the same for you." "People express love differently," I offered, though the justification sounded hollow even to my own ears. "That's a convenient excuse for inconsiderate behavior," Sophia replied with surprising bluntness. "The truth is, I've been self-centered. We all have. We took for granted that you would always be there, always remember everyone else's important days, always be the steady center of the family, while never expecting the same consideration in return." Her insight startled me. I had expected defensiveness or rationalization, not this clear-eyed accountability. "Watching you on television was illuminating," she continued. "Suddenly, I was seeing you as a whole person, not just as my mother. You were funny and wise and charismatic, things I've always known about you but somehow stopped seeing. It was like," she searched for the right words, "like I've been looking at a familiar painting for so long that I stopped actually seeing it. Then suddenly someone hung it in a different light, and I realized how extraordinary it is." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I had promised myself I wouldn't get emotional during this conversation. "I've been thinking about something you said in your second segment," Sophia went on, "about understanding why traditional recipes work before trying to innovate them. It made me realize I've been doing the opposite with our relationship, trying to reinvent something I never fully appreciated in its original form." She reached across the table to take my hand, another gesture that had become rare between us. "I'm sorry, Mom. Not just for the forgotten birthdays, but for taking you for granted, for acting like your cooking was somehow less legitimate than mine because it wasn't in a restaurant, for not seeing how much of my success comes directly from what you taught me." The tears I'd been fighting spilled over. "Thank you for saying that," I managed, squeezing her hand. "It means a lot." "There's something else," Sophia said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I want you to consider this." Inside was a formal proposal, professionally printed on her restaurant's letterhead. "Guest Chef Residency, Eleanor Bennett's Sunday Supper Series." "What is this?" I asked, scanning the detailed document outlining a monthly event at her acclaimed restaurant. "I want you to take over the restaurant one Sunday a month," she explained, enthusiasm brightening her tired face. "A fixed menu of your classic dishes, the recipes that inspired me to become a chef in the first place. No modernist techniques, no deconstructed presentations, just your food, exactly as you've always made it." I stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to cook in your professional kitchen? With your staff? They're already excited about it. Several of them saw your segments and were impressed." She smiled ruefully. "Though I had to admit to my sous chef that your no-stir risotto method is actually better than the one we've been using." The proposal included compensation that made my eyebrows rise, significantly more than I'd ever made in my catering business. But more valuable than the money was what this represented: professional recognition from my daughter, an acknowledgement of my culinary expertise that she had never before explicitly given. "This isn't because you feel guilty about forgotten birthdays?" I asked cautiously. Sophia shook her head. "This is because you're good, Mom, really good. And because I think there's something powerful about honoring the food traditions that come before all the fancy restaurant techniques, the kind of cooking that actually nourishes people on multiple levels." She paused. "Also, selfishly, I miss cooking with you." I looked from the proposal to my daughter's face. the little girl who had once stood on a step stool beside me to learn how to whip cream by hand, now a successful chef in her own right, offering me a place in her professional world. "I'll think about it," I promised, though we both knew from my expression that I was already mentally planning menus. As we finished our tea and cake, our conversation turned to practical matters, the details of the proposed residency, the recipes I might feature, how it would coordinate with my new television schedule. But beneath these logistics hummed a deeper reconnection, tentative but real. When Sophia finally rose to leave, she hugged me properly, a long, tight embrace that felt like both apology and promise. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said quietly, "for the show, for everything, but mostly for finally letting the world see what we should have been appreciating all along." After she left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, the proposal open before me, marveling at how quickly life could change directions. 2 weeks ago, I had been a forgotten mother on another overlooked birthday. Now I was navigating television appearances, cooking class possibilities, and a guest chef residency at my daughter's acclaimed restaurant. More significantly, I was navigating a shifting relationship with my children, one where they were beginning to see me as more than just their mother, and I was beginning to see myself that way too. By my third Thursday on Good Morning City, we'd settled into a comfortable rhythm. The initial novelty had evolved into something more sustainable, a genuine connection with viewers that manifested in growing ratings and enthusiastic social media engagement. My segment had expanded to 15 minutes, with plans to extend it further as audience response continued to build. What began as a simple cooking demonstration had naturally evolved to include more of my perspective on life, family, and finding purpose at any age. Viewers responded particularly strongly to these moments of impromptu wisdom, which the production team had taken to calling Eleanor's Kitchen Truths. "The thing about sourdough bread," I explained during that third Thursday segment while demonstrating my foolproof method, "is that it requires both attention and neglect. You must feed it regularly, but then you must trust it to do its work without hovering, much like raising children or nurturing your own dreams." These philosophical asides emerged naturally as I cooked, surprising even me with their resonance. Something about having my hands busy with familiar tasks freed my mind to articulate thoughts I'd never fully expressed before. After the broadcast, David approached with his usual post-show feedback. "The network executives watched today," he said, trying and failing to appear casual. "They're interested in syndicating your segment to other markets." "Syndicating?" I repeated, unfamiliar with the term. "It means your cooking segments would air on other stations across the country, not just here locally," he explained. "It's a significant step, the beginning of potential national exposure." I absorbed this information as the makeup artist removed my television face, revealing the still surprised woman beneath. "That seems premature. I've only done 3 segments. 3 exceptionally well-received segments," David corrected. "The viewer's response has been unprecedented for local programming. People connect with you, Eleanor." The conversation continued in his office, where he outlined what syndication would mean: greater reach, increased compensation, and potentially expanded opportunities beyond the cooking segments themselves. "There's also been interest from a publisher," he added. "They're looking for a cookbook with your accessible approach and philosophy. Nothing needs to be decided immediately, but these opportunities are worth considering." I left the station that day in a daze, my mind struggling to reconcile the quiet life I'd lived just weeks ago with these new possibilities expanding before me. National television exposure, a cookbook, guest chef appearances. The path ahead looked nothing like the modest retirement I'd envisioned for my 60s. When I arrived home, I found Thomas sitting on my front steps, my youngest child who lived halfway around the world, supposedly managing important financial accounts that couldn't spare him even for brief family visits. "Thomas," I exclaimed, momentarily wondering if I was hallucinating from the shock of the day's developments. "What on earth are you doing here?" He stood, shuffling awkwardly as he always did when nervous. At 29, he still retained the lanky awkwardness of the teenage boy who had left for college and gradually drifted further and further from home. "Surprise," he said weakly. "I caught an earlier flight than planned." "Flight? What flight? I didn't know you were coming at all." "I emailed you last week," he replied, looking confused, "about visiting this weekend. You said it was fine." I vaguely recalled a message I'd responded to while distracted with production meetings, Thomas mentioning a possible visit sometime soon that I'd acknowledged with a generic, "That would be lovely." Nothing about specific dates or actual plans. "I'm sorry," I said, unlocking the door to let us both inside. "Things have been rather hectic with the show. I didn't realize you meant this weekend or that plans were definite." "It's okay," he assured me, following me into the house. "I should have been clearer. He hesitated, setting his small suitcase by the stairs. "After seeing you on TV, I realized how long it's been since I've been home, how much I've missed." The simple admission caught me off guard. Thomas had always been my most emotionally reserved child, the least likely to acknowledge feelings or regrets. "Well, you're here now," I said, covering my surprise with practicality. "Are you hungry? I can put something together." "Actually," he replied with uncharacteristic decisiveness, "I'd like to take you out to dinner. Somewhere nice. My treat." Over a meal at a restaurant far more upscale than Thomas would have chosen in the past, my youngest child revealed the real purpose of his unexpected visit. "I've been offered a position back in the States," he explained, after ordering an expensive bottle of wine. "Senior risk analyst at the New York office. I'd be relocating permanently." "That's wonderful," I replied cautiously, sensing there was more to this development. "I wasn't going to take it," he admitted. "I've built a life overseas, made connections, established myself." "What changed your mind?" He looked down at his plate, then back up at me with startling directness. "You did, or rather, seeing you on television did." "I don't understand." "When I saw you on that first segment, your birthday, it hit me how completely I've removed myself from our family. Not just physically, but emotionally." He took a sip of wine, gathering his thoughts. "I've used distance as an excuse for disconnection. Missed birthdays, holidays, regular conversations. I convinced myself it was unavoidable because of the time difference and geography. International living does complicate things," I acknowledged. "But that's just it," he continued earnestly. "It doesn't have to complicate things to the point of absence. I watched you talk about food being your love language, about cooking as a way of nurturing connections, and I realized I've been starving my most important connections while telling myself it was inevitable." The raw honesty from my usually reserved son left me momentarily speechless. "The job offer came through months ago," he admitted. "I'd been sitting on it, making excuses. Then I saw you, stepping into a completely new chapter at 59, taking risks, becoming visible in a way I've been afraid to be, and it clarified things." "So, you're moving back?" He nodded. "I start next month. I'll be living in New York, but that's a train ride away, not a 15-hour flight." As our conversation continued, Thomas revealed another surprise. He'd been secretly taking cooking classes in Hong Kong for the past year. "I missed your food," he explained, almost shyly. The connection to home it represented. "So I started learning some basics, which turned into a real interest." He smiled ruefully. "I'm not nearly as good as you or Sophia, but I can make a decent coq au vin now." The image of my financially focused son, who had once subsisted almost entirely on takeout, carefully preparing French cuisine in his Hong Kong apartment, touched me deeply. "Perhaps you could appear on my segment sometime," I suggested, only half joking. "We could cook together." To my surprise, he didn't immediately dismiss the idea. "I'd like that, actually, once I'm settled in New York." After dinner, walking back to my car, Thomas asked about the family dynamics he'd been absent from. "Sophia mentioned she's planning some sort of cooking series with you at her restaurant, and Michael seems uncharacteristically interested in family gatherings, suddenly." "Things are evolving," I said carefully. "My unexpected television career has created some shifts in how everyone sees me, how I see myself too." "That's good, right?" he asked, sounding suddenly like the uncertain teenager who used to seek my reassurance before big decisions. I considered the question seriously. "It's complicated. I'm glad to have more meaningful engagement with all of you. But I'm also discovering there's a certain freedom in being seen as more than someone's mother, in being Eleanor first, with my own pursuits and identity." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. It must be strange having us suddenly interested again because you're Eleanor Bennett, TV chef, rather than just mom." His perception surprised me. Of my 3 children, Thomas had always been the most observant but least expressive about emotional nuances. "It is strange," I admitted. But it's also opening doors to new kinds of relationships with all of you, more adult, more equal. If my little television adventure is the catalyst for that, I can't complain. As we reached my car, Thomas gave me an awkward but heartfelt hug. "I'm sorry about your birthday," he said quietly. "Not just this year, but all the years. You deserved better." "Thank you," I replied simply, returning his embrace. "And Thomas, I'm glad you're coming home." Driving back to my house with my youngest child following in his rental car, I marveled at the unexpected ripple effects of one impulsive decision. A simple birthday cooking segment had somehow set in motion changes I could never have anticipated, not just in my own life, but in the lives of my children and our relationships with each other. What other transformations might still be waiting around the corner? "Eleanor, they're ready for you in the green room," the production assistant called, clipboard in hand. I nodded, taking a final glance in the mirror. 6 months after my birthday appearance on Good Morning City, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Not because of any dramatic physical transformation, though the professional styling and camera-ready makeup were certainly upgrades from my former routine, but because of the confidence emanating from her eyes. My eyes. Today marked another milestone in my unexpected journey. My first appearance on a primetime national cooking special, America's Home Cooks, featuring selected regional talents from across the country. What had begun as a small local segment had expanded beyond anyone's expectations, with syndication across 37 markets and a cookbook deal that had publishers in a surprising bidding war. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "We're all watching tonight. Restaurant staff doing a viewing party after service. So proud of you, Mom." Another message appeared from Thomas. "Dinner reservations made for after the broadcast. Michael and family meeting us there." "Break a leg! Is that what you say for TV?" And finally, from Michael, "Kids made signs to cheer on Grandma. Clara insists on wearing her chef hat. See you tonight." I smiled, setting the phone aside as the makeup artist made a final adjustment to my lipstick. The change in my children over these months had been as remarkable as my own transformation. Weekly family dinners had become our new normal, with rotating hosting duties that everyone, even previously kitchen-avoidant Michael, embraced enthusiastically. More significantly, those gatherings had evolved from obligatory check-ins to genuine connections. Real conversations happen now about aspirations and disappointments, fears and dreams, topics we'd previously skirted in favor of surface updates and practical logistics. 2 minutes, Ms. Bennett, the production assistant announced, pulling me from my reflections. I smoothed my emerald green blouse, now my signature color after viewers responded enthusiastically to it during my third segment, and made my way to the set. The National Cooking Special had a different format than my regular segments. Rather than demonstrating a full recipe, each featured cook would share their signature kitchen wisdom in a 5-minute spotlight. Mine centered on transforming humble ingredients into impressive meals, a philosophy born from years of stretching dollars to feed 3 growing children as a single mother. As I took my position under the bright lights, I thought of how far I'd come from that birthday morning 6 months ago. The forgotten mother who had decided to give herself an adventure instead of waiting for acknowledgement that never came. And now, the host announced, from the Northeast region, we are thrilled to welcome the breakout cooking sensation who's been called the most authentic voice in food television, Eleanor Bennett. The camera's red light blinked on, and I stepped into the moment with the ease that still surprised me. "Thank you for that lovely introduction," I began warmly. Though I must say, at 59, being called a breakout sensation feels rather amusing. I'm not breaking out. I'm simply finally stepping into the spotlight that was waiting all along. The 5 minutes passed in a blur of cooking tips, philosophical observations, and the authentic connection with the audience that had become my unexpected strength. When the segment concluded, the studio crew broke into spontaneous applause, a reaction the producer later told me was rare in the typically jaded television environment. "That was magnificent," the host gushed during the commercial break. "The network executives are already talking about developing a concept around you, something more substantial than guest appearances." I thanked her politely, but non-committally. These conversations had been happening with increasing frequency. Offers for larger platforms, more prominent visibility, expanded opportunities. Each required careful consideration of what I truly wanted from this unexpected chapter of my life. After the taping concluded, I changed into a more comfortable outfit for the family dinner celebration. As I gathered my belongings, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Eleanor Bennett, I answered, using the professional greeting I'd adopted for my new public life. Ms. Bennett, this is Amanda Chen from Culinary Heritage Foundation. The voice was brisk but warm. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, I replied, curiosity piqued. The Culinary Heritage Foundation was renowned for its work preserving regional cooking traditions and supporting culinary education in underserved communities. I'll get straight to the point, Amanda continued. We've been following your work. Your approach to cooking as both practical skill and emotional connection resonates deeply with our mission. We're launching a new initiative focused on intergenerational culinary knowledge transfer, and we believe you would be the perfect ambassador. That's very flattering, I said carefully, but what exactly would being an ambassador entail? A series of community cooking workshops across the country, focused on bringing together different generations to share food traditions and techniques. We'd work around your television commitments, of course. The position includes a substantial honorarium and all travel expenses. The offer was unexpected, but oddly aligned with thoughts I'd been having about the direction of my new career. While the television exposure was gratifying, I'd begun to miss the direct human connection of teaching and sharing food in person. I'd like to learn more, I told her. Could we schedule a proper meeting to discuss details? After arranging to meet the following week, I headed to the restaurant where my family waited to celebrate. As I approached the private dining room, I heard the unmistakable sound of my grandchildren's excited voices mingled with adult conversation. I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Michael and his wife Rebecca with their children. Thomas engaged in animated conversation with Sophia's husband, Diego, and Sophia herself arranging something on the table. The room was decorated with handmade signs proclaiming Grandma Eleanor, Kitchen Queen, and As Seen on TV. 6 months ago, I had spent my birthday alone, forgotten by the very people now gathered to celebrate my success. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was the genuine pride in their eyes as they caught sight of me and erupted in cheers and applause. "There she is," Michael called, "the star of the evening." As I moved through a gauntlet of hugs, I caught sight of what Sophia had been arranging, a cake identical to the triple chocolate espresso creation I'd made for her during our reconciliation months ago. "You bake this?" I asked, genuinely touched. "From your exact recipe," she confirmed. Though I'll admit I was terrified the whole time that it wouldn't measure up to your version. "It's perfect," I assured her after the obligatory first taste, and it was. A symbol of roles shifted but not diminished, of lessons transferred in both directions. As dinner progressed, the conversation turned to everyone's latest developments. Thomas was settling into his New York position and had started dating a chef he'd met through Sophia. Michael had scaled back his work hours to prioritize family time. Sophia's restaurant had seen a surge in business following publicity about our Sunday supper series, which had become the hottest reservation in town. "What about you, Mom?" Michael asked as dessert was served. "What's next in the Eleanor Bennett empire?" I laughed at the grandiose terminology. Hardly an empire, but I did receive an interesting offer today from the Culinary Heritage Foundation. As I outlined the ambassador role, I realized I was seeking their input not from obligation or habit, but because I valued their perspectives as the adults they were. "It sounds perfect for you," Thomas observed. "Teaching has always been your gift. We just took it for granted because you were teaching us. The travel would mean adjusting our Sunday supper schedule," Sophia noted practically. "But we could work around it. Maybe quarterly instead of monthly while you're doing the national workshops." "You should absolutely do it," Michael added. "Though selfishly, we'd miss seeing you as often." Their supportive reactions, thoughtful rather than possessive, encouraging rather than guilt-inducing, reflected how profoundly our family dynamic had shifted. "I think I will," I decided. "It feels like the right next step, balancing the television visibility with more direct community engagement." As the evening wound down, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary path that had led from forgotten birthday to national television, from taken-for-granted mother to celebrated culinary voice. The journey had transformed not just my life, but my relationship with my children, allowing all of us to see each other and ourselves more clearly. Most significantly, it had allowed me to finally see myself as I truly was, not just someone's mother, but Eleanor Bennett, a woman with gifts to share, wisdom to impart, and a second act still unfolding in surprising and rewarding ways. "And you're saying you've never written a recipe down before this cookbook?" the interviewer asked incredulously, leaning forward in her chair as we sat in the brightly lit television studio. "Not formally," I admitted with a smile. "For 40 years I've cooked by instinct and memory. Translating those instincts into precise measurements and instructions was quite the challenge. Yet you've produced a 300-page cookbook that's already in its third printing before the official release date," she noted, holding up a copy of Kitchen Truths, Recipes and Wisdom from Eleanor Bennett. The book's cover featured me in my home kitchen, not posed or artificially styled, but captured mid-laugh with flour on my cheek and a wooden spoon in hand. It was Sophia who had insisted on this authentic approach rather than the glossy, perfectly arranged aesthetic typical of celebrity cookbooks. "The recipes themselves are only half the story," I explained. "Each one comes with the context that gave it meaning in my life. The birthday cakes that marked milestones, the weeknight dinners that sustained a family through difficult times, the celebration meals that transformed ordinary moments into memories." 1 year after my birthday television debut, I sat in a national broadcast studio promoting a cookbook that had sparked a bidding war among publishers and generated pre-orders that had astonished everyone in the industry. The book tour would take me to 15 cities over the next month, with cooking demonstrations, signings, and media appearances scheduled back-to-back. "What does your family think of your sudden celebrity?" the interviewer asked, following the script of questions we'd reviewed beforehand. "They're adjusting," I replied with diplomatic understatement that made the studio audience chuckle. "It's been an unexpected journey for all of us. My daughter Sophia, who's an accomplished chef in her own right, has been particularly supportive, even featuring my recipes in her restaurant. And I understand your sons are involved as well?" My youngest, Thomas, has discovered his own passion for cooking since moving back from overseas. He's been testing recipes with me and even joined me for a mother-son cooking segment that viewers seem to enjoy. I smiled, remembering Thomas's initial nervousness and ultimate pride in our televised collaboration. And Michael, my eldest, has become the family documentarian, photographing our cooking sessions and managing what he calls my brand presence, though that term still makes me laugh. The interview continued with questions about specific recipes, my philosophy on food and family, and the Culinary Heritage Foundation workshops I'd been leading across the country. These intergenerational cooking classes had become perhaps the most personally rewarding aspect of my new career, creating spaces where grandparents taught grandchildren family recipes, where cultural cooking traditions were preserved through direct transmission, where the wisdom embedded in food preparation was honored and celebrated. After the taping concluded, I checked my phone to find a group text from my children. "Michael, Mom killed it. Clara watching with her Eleanor Bennett apron on. So weird seeing your mom trend on Twitter." Sophia, already getting reservation calls from people who saw the interview. Sunday supper series booked solid through December. Thomas, surreal. Remember when Mom couldn't figure out how to send a text message? Now she's got more social media followers than all of us combined. Their messages made me smile. The journey had been surreal for all of us, requiring continual adjustments to our family dynamic. My children had needed to reconcile the mother they'd taken for granted with the public figure now recognized by strangers in grocery stores. I'd needed to establish new boundaries around my time and privacy while maintaining the renewed family connections we'd all come to value. The car delivered me to my hotel, where I had a 2-hour break before the evening's book launch event at an upscale cooking store. I kicked off my television-appropriate heels and lay back on the hotel bed, allowing myself a moment of quiet reflection amidst the whirlwind my life had become. A year ago, I had been a forgotten mother on another overlooked birthday. Today, I had a television contract, a best-selling cookbook, a national ambassador role, and a completely transformed relationship with my children. The simple cooking segment that was meant to be a small birthday adventure for myself had catalyzed changes I could never have imagined. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was David Russell, the executive producer who had given me my first opportunity on Good Morning City. "Eleanor, ratings just came in for your interview, absolutely through the roof," he announced without preamble. "The network is more convinced than ever about the primetime special we discussed." The special was a proposed hour-long program built around my approach to cooking and connecting generations through food. Unlike my regular segments or guest appearances, this would be an entire show with me as the central figure, a level of exposure and responsibility that both excited and intimidated me. "I'm still considering it, David," I reminded him. "The schedule would be demanding, especially with the foundation work and the potential for a second cookbook." "Just say you'll keep the door open," he pressed. "This kind of audience response doesn't happen often. You've tapped into something people are hungry for, and I don't just mean the recipes." After promising to continue the conversation when I returned from the book tour, I ended the call and began preparing for the evening's event. The cooking store had sold out all tickets weeks in advance, with a waiting list that had surprised even the publisher's most optimistic marketing team. As I refreshed my makeup and changed into a more comfortable but still camera-ready outfit, I considered David's words. What exactly had I tapped into that resonated so powerfully with audiences? It wasn't just cooking expertise. There were far more technically skilled chefs with television platforms. It wasn't celebrity appeal or youthful charisma. The answer came to me as I scrolled through emails on my phone and found a message from an attendee of last week's Culinary Heritage Workshop. "Watching you embrace this new chapter with such authenticity gives me courage to pursue dreams I thought had expired. Thank you for showing that reinvention isn't just for the young." That was it. Authenticity and reinvention. I had stumbled into the spotlight without calculation or artifice, bringing decades of life experience and hard-earned wisdom with me. In a culture that often rendered women invisible as they aged, my very presence as a woman embracing a new beginning at 59 challenged comfortable narratives about whose stories matter and when opportunities expire. The revelation brought both clarity and responsibility. This platform wasn't just about sharing recipes or building a personal brand. It was about representing possibilities for women who had been told, explicitly or implicitly, that their time for meaningful contribution and recognition had passed. When I arrived at the cooking store that evening, the line of people waiting for signed copies stretched around the block. What struck me most wasn't the number of people, but their diversity. Grandmothers and granddaughters attending together, young professionals clutching sticky-noted copies of recipes they'd already tried, middle-aged women who approached with tears in their eyes to whisper how my story had inspired them to reconsider dreams they'd shelved decades ago. As I signed books and chatted with readers, I caught sight of familiar faces arriving through the staff entrance. Michael, Sophia, Thomas, and their families, all dressed for the occasion and beaming with unmistakable pride. "Surprise," Sophia called as they approached. "We couldn't miss your big night." "All of you came?" I asked, genuinely moved. "But you have the restaurant tonight, and Thomas has that project deadline." "Some things are more important," Thomas said simply. Michael nodded agreement. "Besides, how often does your mother become a culinary celebrity? We had to document this properly." He patted the professional camera hanging around his neck. As my family gathered around me for photos that would later appear in magazines and social media, I marveled at the full-circle journey of the past year. The mother once forgotten on her birthday was now celebrated not just by her children, but by thousands of strangers who found meaning in her belated emergence from the background into her own spotlight. And in that moment, surrounded by both my biological family and this new community that had embraced me, I understood that this chapter was only beginning, that the most meaningful recipes of my life were still being written. 1 year to the day after my forgotten 59th birthday, I stood in my kitchen at 5 in the morning, piping delicate rosettes onto a 3-tiered cake. The house was quiet except for the radio playing softly in the background and the occasional ping of my phone as messages arrived from different time zones. The cake, an elegant creation with hand-painted watercolor fondant and edible gold leaf, represented everything I had learned in 6 decades of cooking and 2 years of professional television work. It was both a technical showcase and a labor of love, designed for a very special celebration, my own 60th birthday party. Not the quiet, overlooked occasion my 59th had been, but a carefully planned gathering that had been marked on my children's calendars for months. The celebration would be filmed as the finale of my primetime special, Eleanor Bennett, Kitchen Truths, combining personal milestone with professional achievement in a way that felt perfectly appropriate for this new chapter of my life. My phone chimed with another message, this one from Caitlin, the friend whose suggestion had started this whole journey. Happy birthday, Eleanor, looking at the production schedule for today. Still can't believe that casual suggestion for you to appear on my little morning show turned into all of this. So proud to have played a small part in your amazing journey. See you at the venue at noon for final prep. I smiled, remembering how reluctant I'd been initially. How the television appearance had simply been a small gift to myself on a day when I expected no recognition from others. How strange life's turning points often appeared only in retrospect. The past year had been a whirlwind of opportunities and adjustments. The cookbook had become a surprise bestseller, remaining on the lists for 26 consecutive weeks. The Culinary Heritage Foundation workshops had expanded to all 50 states, with waiting lists in every location. The Sunday supper series at Sophia's restaurant had become so popular that we'd added a second monthly date, with special quarterly events featuring all 3 of my children cooking alongside me. Most significant was the primetime special airing tonight, an hour-long program that would combine cooking demonstrations, intergenerational cooking stories from across the country, and intimate glimpses into my own family's culinary reconciliation. The birthday celebration would serve as both personal milestone and symbolic culmination of the year's journey. As I added the final touches to the cake, my doorbell rang, an unexpected sound at this early hour. Wiping my hands on a kitchen towel, I went to answer it, assuming it was an early delivery of flowers or supplies for the party. Instead, I found Michael, Sophia, and Thomas standing on my doorstep, each holding a small gift bag and wearing slightly mischievous expressions. "Happy birthday, Mom," they chorused as I opened the door. "What are you all doing here at 5:30 in the morning?" I asked, ushering them inside despite my confusion. "We made a pact," Michael explained, "that we would never again let one of your birthdays begin without acknowledgement. So we decided to surprise you with breakfast," Sophia added, holding up a canvas bag that clearly contained cooking supplies. "Though knowing you, you've been up for hours already." "Working on the cake," I confirmed, leading them to the kitchen where my creation stood in all its glory. "Mom, that's incredible," Thomas said, examining the delicate details. "Too beautiful to eat. That's what photographs are for," I replied with a smile. Beautiful food should be both admired and enjoyed. While Sophia took charge of preparing a birthday breakfast, Michael and Thomas insisted I open their gifts immediately rather than waiting for the official celebration later. "This one first," Michael said, handing me a small rectangular package. Inside was a beautifully bound leather journal with kitchen truths embossed on the cover, the same title as my cookbook and television special. Opening it, I found page after page of handwritten notes, photographs, and memories. "We've been collecting stories from people you've impacted this year," Michael explained. "Workshop participants, viewers, readers, students from your classes. Everyone from famous chefs who've praised your approach to grandmothers who finally wrote down their family recipes because of you." I turned the pages with growing emotion, reading testimonials from people across the country who had found meaning, connection, or inspiration through my unexpected public platform. Eleanor taught me to cook my mother's recipes that I thought died with her. Now my children know their grandmother through her food. After my divorce, I couldn't find joy in cooking just for myself. Eleanor's philosophy about self-nourishment helped me reclaim my kitchen and my confidence. I started cooking with my teenage daughter after watching Eleanor's show. It's become our special time together during these difficult years. I struggled to find words, deeply moved by this tangible evidence that my work had meaning beyond television ratings or book sales. "This is the most thoughtful gift." "Open mine next," Sophia urged, passing me a small box. Inside was a chef's knife of exceptional quality, its blade engraved with my initials and the handle made from wood that looked strangely familiar. "Is this?" I began, running my fingers along the handle. "Wood from Grandma's old rolling pin," Sophia confirmed. "The one you taught me to make pie crust with. I had it custom made by that artisan knife maker who supplies the restaurant." The significance brought tears to my eyes. My grandmother's tool transformed into a new instrument that connected 3 generations of women in my family through our shared language of food. Thomas's gift was a pair of airplane tickets, first class to Paris, he explained, "for you and whoever you want to take. The reservation at Le Cinq is already made, and there's a private cooking class arranged with Chef Legrand. Remember how you always talked about wanting to study French cuisine? I can't believe you remembered that," I said softly. That was a dream I mentioned. Goodness, it must have been 20 years ago. In the car on the way to drop me at college, Thomas confirmed. You said someday when we were all grown, you'd finally go to Paris and learn proper French cooking techniques. Then you laughed and said it was silly to have student dreams at 40. And now you're going at 60, Sophia added, as an established culinary authority who will probably end up teaching Chef Legrand a thing or two. As my children moved around my kitchen with easy familiarity, Sophia preparing a frittata with practiced precision, Michael setting the table with the good china usually reserved for special occasions, Thomas brewing coffee exactly the way I preferred it, I marveled at how drastically our relationships had evolved in 2 years. The forgotten mother had become the celebrated center of not just her family's attention, but a growing public platform. The children who couldn't remember to call on my birthday now orchestrated elaborate surprises and managed their busy schedules around my events. The dynamics had shifted from obligation to appreciation, from taking for granted to genuine valuing. After breakfast, as they helped clean up before departing for their own preparations for the evening's festivities, Michael paused while drying a serving platter. "You know what I realized recently?" he said thoughtfully. "If we had remembered your birthday 2 years ago, if we'd all called and sent gifts and done what we should have, none of this would have happened." "That's true," I acknowledged. "My little television adventure was entirely because I decided to give myself a birthday experience rather than waiting for acknowledgement from others." "So in a strange way," Thomas mused, "our thoughtlessness led to this amazing second act in your life, and to our family finding a better way to be together," Sophia added. I considered this paradox as I hugged each of them goodbye, promising to see them at the venue later. Their observation was accurate. The pain of being forgotten had directly led to the joy of being truly seen, not just by my children, but by thousands of others who found value in my perspective and experience. Alone again in my kitchen, I added final touches to the birthday cake that would serve as centerpiece for both a personal celebration and a televised milestone. The woman who would blow out 60 candles tonight was fundamentally different from the one who had faced 59 alone. More confident, more visible, more fully herself. As I carefully packed the cake for transport, my phone rang with a FaceTime call from my 3-year-old granddaughter, Clara, Michael's youngest. "Happy birthday, Grandma TV," she exclaimed, using the nickname she'd created upon seeing me on the television in their living room. "I'm wearing my cooking apron like you." "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, smiling at her enthusiastic face and the miniature chef's hat perched precariously on her curls. "Are you coming to Grandma's party tonight?" "Yes. Daddy says I can stay up late because it's special. Will you teach me cake decorating soon? I want to make pretty flowers like you do." "Of course I will. Every good chef needs to start learning young." After we ended the call, I stood in my kitchen, the space that had always been the heart of my identity, even when that identity was overshadowed by others' needs and achievements. Now that same passion for nourishing others had expanded beyond my family's table to touch lives across the country, creating connections and preserving traditions that might otherwise have been lost. The forgotten birthday had become a doorway to an unexpected future, one where Eleanor Bennett was not just someone's mother or widow, but a woman with her own meaningful contribution to make. A woman who had discovered that it's never too late to step into the spotlight and share the wisdom accrued through decades of living. As I prepared to celebrate 60 years of life, with my family, with colleagues, and with a television audience who had welcomed me into their homes, I felt profound gratitude for the painful gift of that overlooked 59th birthday. Sometimes, it seemed, we needed to be forgotten before we could truly be seen by others, and more importantly, by ourselves. Thank you for listening. Please write a comment rating my story from 0 to 10, subscribe, and send it to someone who also likes to hear stories like this. Best regards. Best regards.